Well, thank you very much, everybody. And can I just say, I'd like to echo what Gillian said. It is extraordinary and delightful to listen to a minister who talks with compassion and with expertise and commitment in an area like this. How different that is from my experience at Westminster. You know, my dad was the boss of the Mary Hill brew. It was the biggest one in the country. He left school at 16, worked his way up, and he saw his job as being a social worker, and he thought it was his job to go out there and maximise the benefits that people got. And nothing irritated him more than opening tabloid newspapers where they talked about social security scroungers. He said, because the problem isn't people overclaiming, the problem is people underclaiming, and especially when they get a wee bit older, they feel embarrassed and they don't want to be one of these social security scroungers. So they don't claim their entitlement and they live in poverty as a result. And goodness knows we're still seeing the same thing today with the vile coverage that this issue gets in the newspapers. If only they went after tax dodgers with the same enthusiasm that they go after the very poorest who are trying to get benefits, how much happier our society would be. Jean raised all sorts of issues. Just one that you touched on struck me as something that's underreported. The issue of young people having their housing benefits removed. And I went to a meeting of the Albert Kennedy Trust recently. Now, the Albert Kennedy Trust doesn't operate, sadly, yet in Scotland, though they want to do so. And they look after young gay people who are the highest suicide risk in the country. The largest percentage of people who kill themselves are young gay men, teenage boys. And very often what tips them over is violence at home. So of course they need to get out and get into houses of their own. But if the government then removes benefit, making it impossible for them to move out, they either become homeless or else they stay with within abusive family relationships. Can you imagine the pressure? Trying to deal both with your burgeoning sexuality and all the prejudices that you face about that, which are particularly cruel in some parts of the country, in some communities. And in addition, you're being told that you're trapped within your house and you aren't allowed to leave it because of this benefit change, even though the government openly acknowledges that this is a problem. Right at the beginning, Rona mentioned how often we as parliamentarians get hit with some truly heartrending stories that you get at surgeries. And I'll tell you one of the ones that I got that I will, till my dying day, I will never forget. And I can talk about it because the lady gave me permission to do so. It's a lady who lives with dwarfism. And she's about that height. And she came into one of my surgeries. And when she went away to get reassessed under the new rules, she was awarded 0 disability points. 0 disability points. And of course, as you said, Jean, people often, they put their best foot forward, don't they, when they go into these interviews? They put on their makeup, they put on their hat, they try and do the best they possibly can. If you've lived with dwarfism since birth, your parents have constantly told you, you can do that, you can compete, don't you give up. So of course, when they said to her, how far can you walk? Could you walk a football pitch? She said, oh, of course I could walk a football pitch. But you couldn't walk a football pitch. Of course you couldn't. She described to me what it was like trying to get to work on public transport without her specially adapted car, which had been threatened. And she made the very obvious point that her legs weren't big enough to move between the subway car and the platform. She couldn't do that. And when she climbed a set of stairs, her arm couldn't reach the handrail. And the risers were too tall for her. And she said that if the escalator wasn't working, what she had to do was go up on her hands. I mean, truly heartrending. And she'd been awarded 0 disability points. She was in tears, and she said, what am I going to do? So I said to her, well, I'm going to go to your tribunal for you, and I will represent you. And of course that's impossible for an MP to do, because you've got to take a day off work, you get in trouble from the chief whip because you're not turned up to vote, then the tabloids start saying, he hasn't voted that day, why is he skiving? But I went to the tribunal, And it was an extraordinary, cruel experience, because you saw the people who were in the lobby waiting. It's small wonder, I think you'll know the figure, Jean, what percentage of these get overturned at appeal. Because it was the walking wounded who were there, and these were the people who'd been turned down. And I went in and I sat with her, and I said, you say that you can carry a box. I'm just intrigued. What size of box are you talking about? And they muttered and consulted. And then they said, well, I suppose it's a catering box. And I said, well, a catering box of what? And they said, well, crisps. And I said, well, I worked in Tesco's as a student, and I happen to know what size a catering box of crisps is. Catering box of crisps is that size. I said, now, if this woman was to try and carry that, first of all, her arms wouldn't get round it. And secondly, even if she could, she wouldn't be able to see over it. That's an absurd test for her. And they happened to have a box of Andrex on the table. And I said, let's do scale. That for her is a catering box of crisps for me. She can carry that, but she can't carry a catering box of crisps. And the test that you've given her is one that she should never have passed. And therefore, that calls into question, surely, the whole system that you're operating here. And you know, that woman, she won because of that appeal. And I raised the issue with the Prime Minister, because I just happened to be drawn for Prime Minister's question time, just by pure chance. And I asked him if he'd ever gone to one of these, and if so, if he thought that the hearings were fair and dignified and compassionate. And you always knew when David Cameron was in trouble, because he would turn away from whoever was asking a question, and he would start yabbering at the speaker, and you knew you had him. And he said that he would write to me. And you know, I didn't know him, but I thought, given his background, because he mentioned his disabled son, I thought this man will go away and he'll find out about this, he'll look into it, and maybe, just maybe, he'll write back a sensible letter. I can't tell you how disappointed I was with the letter that he sent me. It was so foolish and so unsympathetic and so robotic. And I thought, this guy doesn't care at all about decent reform. This is about saving money, and it's cruel. And we face a general election coming up soon. I don't know if you've heard there's going to be an election. I'll tell you how it happened. There's been so much cynical press speculation about this. What happened was, Theresa May had never had a thought about a general election, and she just happened to be walking through